Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to day 20 of the 40 days of preparation. And congratulations, if you started out with us from the beginning, you are officially at the halfway point. And if you didn't start with us from the beginning, just know it's not too late to jump on board, be a part of what God is doing in these 40 days of preparation through fasting and prayer. But before we jump into today's devotional, let me just share with you a really quick story of mine and what God did in my life. When I first got my life changed, many of you have probably heard this story. I've shared it on different platforms, but God led me into a season of fasting and praying. But one of the details that I don't often go deeply into is that right at about the halfway point of the fast that God had called me to do, I actually was ready to quit. In fact, I was so ready to quit, I actually told God in prayer, God, I'm done. I gave it my best shot, and I was trying to be strong in the fast, and there were several things that I said that I wouldn't do, and I ended up doing some of them, and I felt so discouraged and deflated and hadn't yet felt like breakthrough. You know, you can feel when you've had real breakthrough, and I hadn't yet felt that. And so halfway through the fast, I actually went into my room and I prayed, and I said a prayer that sounded like, God, I really tried. I really gave it the good old try, and I'm sorry, but I'm done, and I'm not going to continue this fast. And God spoke to me in that moment, and he said, son, he said, put on this teachings. I had bought like a stack of teachings, and he said, put on this specific teaching. And when I put it on, and I kind of wrestled about it, I thought, you know, I knew the topic. I thought that's not what I need to hear. But as soon as I put it on, the preacher who was preaching the message started out not talking about the topic of what the teaching was on. I had never heard it before, but talking about not walking in condemnation. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. And so I want to encourage you, whether you've done the fast perfectly or you've not done the fast perfectly, keep going. And I decided in that moment, I knew God was telling me, my son, keep going. A righteous man may fall 7 times, but he gets back up. Keep going. And it was in that second half, after I made a decision to continue to move forward with the fast that God had called me to do, that was when my life was totally changed. And I wouldn't be making this video today had it not been for the second half of that fast. So that was all free. That wasn't even part of the daily devotional today, but I do want to jump into Luke chapter 3 today, which we're on the topic of being filled with the Spirit. And so I want to look at Luke chapter 3, verses 21 through 22, and then we'll fast forward a little bit to Luke chapter 4 as well. And I hope that first portion, I hope that encouraged you. Just know that if you've messed up in any way on this fast, you're not the only one who has done fasts in an imperfect way, but God's not looking for perfection, but he is looking for persistence, that we're persistent to be who he's called to be. All right, on to the daily devotional. Luke chapter 3, verses 21 through 22 says this: when all the people were baptized, it came to pass that Jesus was also baptized. And while he prayed, the heaven was opened, and the Holy Spirit descended in bodily form like a dove upon him. And a voice came from heaven, which said, "You are my beloved Son, in you I am well pleased." Then fast forward a few verses later to Luke chapter 4, verses 1 through 2. So this is right after Jesus was baptized. It says, then Jesus, being filled with the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, being tempted for 40 days by the devil. And in those days he ate nothing, and afterward, when they had ended, he was hungry. So what does this mean? Well, let's look at Luke chapter 3. We see that Jesus was both baptized and in water and filled with the Holy Spirit. Before Jesus was filled with the Spirit, he lived a relatively normal life, right? He was a carpenter. But when he was filled with the Spirit, everything changed. Miracles took place, crowds began to gather, life-changing messages were preached, and persecution began to come, all as a result of Jesus yielding himself to the Holy Spirit's guidance. However, his journey didn't start with the things that I just listed. It actually started with the Holy Spirit leading him into 40 days of fasting and prayer and preparation. And the Holy Spirit, it says, led him into the wilderness. Do you feel like God has led you into a season of fasting and prayer, or 40 days even, like what we're doing, which obviously sounds familiar? Well, that's what he did with Jesus as well. And then later in Luke chapter 4, notice what happened. He returned in the power of the Spirit. It says he returned from what? From those 40 days of fasting and prayer. Not only was he fasting and praying, but he was fasting and praying in the wilderness. And it was from that point on that he returned in the power of the Spirit, and everything had changed. Has the Holy Spirit led you to fast and pray? If so, stand in faith that in the same way that Jesus was activated in a new way through a combination of fasting and prayer, God will do it for you too. And why can we think that? Because not only did Jesus save us, but it's because he showed us how to operate in the fullness of the Spirit to fulfill our God-given calling. When Jesus became a real human being, he surrendered his powers as God and became dependent on the Holy Spirit to guide him, just like us. He had the same Holy Spirit in him that you and I have in us. Make sure to catch this. Jesus relied on the same Holy Spirit for direction and power that we have living in us today. I think sometimes when we picture the life of Jesus, we picture as if Jesus had the real Holy Spirit or the original Holy Spirit, and we have Holy Spirit Jr. with us today. But we don't. We have the same Holy Spirit that Jesus relied on for direction and power. We rely on the same Spirit. And so we shouldn't look any farther than the example and the life of Jesus as far as what it is that we're called to do. So if Jesus isn't above fasting and praying, we shouldn't be either. When you fast and pray, though, and prepare for God to do something amazing, believe that as in the life of Jesus, from this point forward, you will be activated in new ways. And I want to encourage you with this. Notice the Holy Spirit didn't lead him somewhere miraculous to fast and pray. He led him into the wilderness. Sometimes when we plant or if we sow things, we want to see a harvest immediately, right? We want to plant a tree. I don't know if you would feel this way, but I feel like if I were to plant an apple seed, it's because I want to eat apples. So I'm ready to see the fruit come out. But what actually happens is we plant and we water and we wait. And we wait. And actually before the seed does anything above the ground, it actually does things beneath the ground that we can't even see yet. And so I want to encourage you to not be discouraged if you feel like you're not seeing things yet. And maybe you are already seeing things. But if you're not, don't be discouraged by that, because it doesn't mean that God isn't working. If you're doing what the Holy Spirit has directed you to do, keep going. Keep going. Don't give up. Allow the Holy Spirit to fill you and to direct you and guide you, and watch what it is that he will do. So I want to encourage you, take time and pray. Pray for specific direction from the Holy Spirit, and believe that he will lead you and guide you as to what your next step is. It was the Holy Spirit who directed Jesus into the wilderness to fast and pray. However, it was Jesus who chose to obey and follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. In the same way, the Holy Spirit will speak things to us, but we have the responsibility to obey and to do what it is that he's saying. And if you've obeyed perfectly, great, congratulations. And if you haven't yet, though, get back up and jump back onto what it is the Holy Spirit is telling you, and believe that no matter where he leads you, trust that you can't go wrong by following what he says. Just watch as a combination of obedience and time will cause you to see the supernatural fruitfulness of God in your life. And I think we can all understand obedience, but the time portion may frustrate us a little bit, because time oftentimes takes time. Someone may say, I'm willing to be patient, but just not for long. Well, God's calling us to have patience that endures, patience that is actually patient. But when we do what it is that God is calling us to do, and we lean into what the Holy Spirit is saying, we allow the Holy Spirit to fill us, guide us, and lead us, and we obey what it is that he's saying, just watch as in the same way Jesus left those 40 days in a totally different state than he was in before. And as far as what the Holy Spirit led him to do, we see him activated in miracles, and mighty things were happening from God that we didn't see happen before. But it started out with a 40-day time of preparation, of fasting and prayer, of all places, in the wilderness. So be encouraged. The Lord has got you. He's got a plan for you. So be who you're called to be. Allow the Holy Spirit to guide you, and just watch as he will activate you in new ways. Keep going. You got this. Halfway through the 40 days of preparation, let's believe that the second half is going to be even better than the first half. God bless you. We love you, and we'll see you tomorrow.